given that I had exited my first startup, I had made my millions of dollars, I had bought a house that I wanted, I had bought a car that I wanted. I didn't have a need for me to seek for something that was immediate. Big Bang Boom in my head and how I talk to people about has always been a frugal, diversified defense company.
The key to a sustaining and a booming economy is a peaceful border. As a country, we're just starting to make big strides to becoming a global economic powerhouse. From demographics to geopolitics, the factors seem to be aligning for India to become a net exporter of critical technologies for the world over the next few decades. However, the world is not ideal. We are heading into an increasingly turbulent one, the kind filled with border disputes, military conflicts, and tussles for very critical resources. Therefore, it becomes that much more critical for India to constantly upgrade its defense capabilities with modern day technologies and strategies to effectively address evolving threats and ensure national security. Hey everyone, welcome to a special edition of Crafting Bharat, powered by Innovations Venture Studio in association with Special Invest, Byte Avenue, and Fart Capital. Our beverage partner is Stripe Kombucha. In this edition, we uncover the journeys of India's best deep tech entrepreneurs building the future of humankind. I'm your host Nitish. Today we have with us Dr. Shivaraman, co-founder of Big Bang Boom Solutions. Big Bang Boom is building on advanced technologies from anti-drone systems to fire suppressants to that of complex electro-optic systems for Indian defense. Dr. Shiva, welcome to Crafting Bharat.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Shiva, you've got a PhD in nanotechnology. And suddenly, for the better part of your life, you've been an academic, and suddenly you start up an edtech company, right? And then you get an exit of that edtech company at an IPO of sorts. And now you're suddenly a defense founder building on defense solutions from India, for India, and maybe even for the world. So could you explain us how one makes sense of this journey that you've had, right from your undergrad days to that of being an academic to that of being a founder now?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a question of chasing one's dreams and taking each opportunity that comes our way. So I did my undergrad in computer science. As a part of my undergrad, I got a chance to go to the Carnegie Mellon University in what is now popular as a student abroad program. In Carnegie, I was introduced to nanotech as a new field, something that was emerging, something that could place humans on the moon, something that could make robots crawl on walls, etc. And that sounds extremely fascinating. Now, computer science has always been a part of my passions, and which is why I did a bachelor's in that. But then nanotech sounded like science fiction. It sounded like what you read in the comic books, and a chance to make that a reality. I mean, why not jump at it? So I did my master's and PhD in nanotech and did a postdoc in hepatic cancer. That again is a little bit of a jump to try and figure out. But the idea was that in nanotech, we were really pushing the edges of the science and technology. We were trying to figure out what is the best the humankind could achieve with what resources are available. And one of the most relevant applications of that is obviously the medical field. And so it obviously made sense to do a postdoc in that. Academics is a fantastic place to be in. You tend to get to innovate a lot. But then one of the biggest drawbacks of academics is that the translation of academic research to real world applications is still not as good as it should be. And that was one of the reasons the entrepreneurial journey started. The EdTech company was a logical translation. We used to work with universities in India trying to solve the problem of India not having enough research or problem solving as a part of their regular pedagogy. Right, so we used to work with universities on building up research incubators, allowing students to engage with real-world problems and solving them. It was a fantastic hit. I mean, we started off with the private institutions, but then the best of the country joined on board. That got acquired. We went through an IPO, and it was a fantastic, let's say the first step of the journey. But then again, one of the biggest issues I had with the first firm was that the end result or the target towards which the entire company was working was to inculcate a research mindset. And universities that were our primary clients were only interested in academic research. They never really cared about the products getting into the ecosystem or into actual use. They were more worried about the patents being filed, the papers being published, etc. So for me, I needed to get my hands dirty with something that made a difference in human lives. And technology was something that I've always been good at. And so you put the two together and you figure out what is the one field that's always been in the forefront of technology. Whether it's during the era of colonization, during World War One, World War Two, the country that's dominated the world even today is always the country that has the best defense technologies. And so if you want to really build the cutting edge tech, defense seemed to be a logical place to be in. And that's how Big Bang Boom started.
But it's also not an easy place to sell to, isn't it? If you're choosing to build a startup in defense, then inherently you're also choosing a domain that's known for not being very startup friendly. So why make this choice at all? That's question one. The inference here is that you could have also started out with very high-tech commercial applications and then backtrack your way to defense, right? But then you said, I'm going to do defense for India.
Yep. I think there were two major driving forces towards starting a defense tech company back in 2018. One was, as I told you, the journey so far and how I felt that defense is the one of the most experimental adapters of technology. Like they really, any defense forces, not just India, around the world, they really grasp at the real cutting edge. Like for example, today we love our cars. I mean, there are dime a dozen car companies in the country, but all of these are the guys who used to make engines for aircrafts during World War II. Right? It's basically most of the big tech companies today are derivatives of technologies that were made either for the US defense or the European defense or for Asian defense per se. So that's obviously a driving force. But looking at it personally for me, defense sounded a lot more exciting. I had already dabbled a little bit with biotech, I dabbled a little bit with edtech, etc. Defense sounded like exciting. Most importantly, given that I had exited my first startup, I had made my millions of dollars, I had bought a house that I wanted, I had bought a car that I wanted, I married the girl that I wanted. I didn't have a need for me to seek for something that was immediate. I could play the game for 10 years. I didn't need a startup that was successful within 2 years' time. I could spend 10 years and 15 years to get to where I wanted. And that is one of the essential reasons why defense is an acceptable choice for me, while it may have not been an acceptable choice to many other people.
Got it. And in one of our earlier conversations, I remember you mentioning the likes of Anduril and Palantir, etc., that you wanted to build a company as big as those guys are in the West for India and make tech and export it for the world. But if you look at Palantir, they've been around for a very long time. And if you look at Anduril, it required somebody like Palmer Luckey to have the kind of exits that he did to come out and start a company and then go bang, right? In what ways are you building your company differently from that of a normal startup in India to be able to achieve that level of success? Because you seem to have neither the time nor the resources that both of them had.
I think there are two major things that we are doing differently. The first thing is the DNA of Big Bang Boom itself. Big Bang Boom, in my head and how I talk to people about, has always been a frugal, diversified defense company. That basically, both those two words are very, very critical, right? Frugal basically means we don't spend money at all. And we spend very, very little money. If you had come to our office maybe 3 years back or a couple of years back, you probably wouldn't have invited me to the show. We were working out of a 2 BHK, we had leaky walls, etc. We put all our money into the people who were building the cool technology for us. We did not spend any money on marketing. All the marketing was word of the mouth for us. So we ensured that we were basically putting money where it counted. And we also did something very important where we leveraged our capabilities. There are some things that we are good at. And I say we, I mean the promoters and the core people who are there as a part of Big Bang Boom. We come from a NetTech background. As a part of my previous company, we had built this fantastic platform where we connected hundreds of thousands of researchers with a lot of industries to be able to synergize, to see or explore if the academia could meet the research needs of the industry. It's been sold, we have exited it, everything is fine. But what we still have access to is the best brains of the country. We have a platform on which the best researchers of the country are there in a single place. The platform already maps out who's good at what. So we start off from there and we say, whenever the defense throws us a problem, we'll go back. We know the right professors, we know the guys who are willing to run the extra mile. Probably 20% of the overall ecosystem. Use the infrastructure, use the capabilities, and build the products out. That means that I don't spend as much money as an Anduril would, or a Palantir would, or even the other defense companies in India would. So if you see what we did in the first 2 years, we barely spent a few crores in building out not one but 4 different products. The second part of it is diversification, right? So the one thing that we did very early is we realized that defense is going to have a single buyer problem. We are always going to have a problem of having to deal with the government and having to deal with armed forces which have very, very specific needs. And so we decided that we'll work on multiple domains and multiple product lines. And that's worked out very well to us, very well for us so far.
How does a career academician learn to sell to defense? In what ways are your skill sets evolving from the time you started Big Bang Boom to now?
So there are some skill sets that I always had that has been very, very useful to us in the current avatar. One of the things is having to deal with bureaucrats, having to deal with an ecosystem that has been resistant to change. Academics is very similar. So imagine the previous company, right? The previous company, we had to go into an academic institution which already has an R&D department, which has a dean of research, a director of research, and tell them, you know what, we are coming in and we will do research in a better way. We will build better infrastructure and we will consult to you on how to do what you have done for the last 60 years. So it was obviously a very, very tough sell. And to defense, it's very similar. You need to go in to the armed forces and tell them, you know what, you guys are always bought from outside. First, you have to convince them that you have the capability of building. And then you also need to educate them on the latest of technologies. And being where we are, people are always more open to listening to technological advice from, let's say, foreigners, people who are established as leaders like the Lockheed Martins of the world, then let's say a company with a funny sounding name like Big Bang Boom. So in that way, it was a very, very similar enterprise. There was a lot of dealing with bureaucrats. There was a dealing with an entity that was resistant to change over decades. So for us, the translation was not very difficult. But what we had to learn was basically that defense is a very different product development ecosystem, primarily in India. And this is something that I've realized only over the last 5 years, that even foreign companies, even let's say the best of the world, struggle to provide high quality defense equipment in India because India has such unique needs. Like for example, one of the most popular problem statements that's been there in the industry is high altitude logistics, where the Indian Army operates at altitudes from 4,500 to 5,500 meters. Most of them are served by the Jawans of our country today. So they are looking at technology, primarily let's say drones, that will be able to lift not a lot, maybe 50 kgs of weight and transport logistics at that altitudes. What is the issue with this? One, no other country in the world except our friendly neighbor has to deal with that kind of an altitude. So the US, the Europe, Israel doesn't make these drones because they don't have any requirement to operate at these altitudes. They have no engagement with any hostile forces at this altitude. Second, now because they are not building tech for it, you are dependent on people in India building tech for it. But in India, people don't have access to those regions. So I can sit in Chennai, or I can sit in Bangalore, I can sit in Delhi, I can build whatever I want, but I have never deployed this technology there. So it's very hard. So you will work for 2 years or 3 years, and then you go there and your product will collapse. It will not even function like 10% of what it's expected to do. So that's one problem. The second problem is that India as a country has such diverse ecosystems. You have the deserts in the west, you have the suburban regions and the hilly regions in the east, extremely high moisture content. You have the very high altitudes, very low temperatures in the north. We have a very high salt content and humidity in the south. And then you have the central plains. So to have a single piece of equipment that will be able to operate in all of these terrains is very, very difficult. See, it's a lot easier. Let's say you want to make something for the Middle East. You need to just deal with the heat. You don't need to deal with the kind of humidity that India deals with. So, and Indian government always looks at interoperability. They want the same, because they can't keep buying different pieces of equipment for different places. So they want the same equipment to work in all the places so that they can quickly move it around. It becomes a huge challenge. So these are things that you learn. You realize that it's not just about getting, let's say, a fantastic AI algorithm working, or it's not just about letting it work in the lab or even productizing it, right? You need to be able to ruggedize it. You need to be able to make it work at extremely low temperatures, extremely high temperatures. You need to make sure that it doesn't interfere with any of the other systems that are there around. So I think those are things that we have learned on the way. That those were things that maybe would have made me blink if I had known it upfront, that it's such a uphill task to go for.
But then you're here and you're building it already. So I guess it's a little too late.
It's a little too late. Yeah, I mean, there are just too many eggs in that basket.
Right. Personally, I've also had the belief that defense founders have to be really great program managers, right? And maybe even more so than the average other startup founders. And the reason is, at the earliest stage, you're not just dabbling with one product. By nature, you're dabbling with multiple products, but also multiple different product categories as such. Would you agree with that? And the second part is, how do you then structure your org to ensure that the knowledge transfer across every group is proper, functioning well, if you're dealing with multiple categories? For example, you do anti-drones, you do fire suppressants, you also have naval products.
True. I think that's an essential part. Not every defense company operates in that way. Usually, defense companies prefer to get their first product out of the door and then sort of double down on that core technology. You can take, like, for example, you take a company, there may be an optics based company, or if you take another company, there'll be a drone based company. So most of the companies like to specialize in a particular domain, and that's primarily because that's the way you can more effectively organize your people. You ensure optimal utilization of your resources, etc. But like you rightly said, it's not the ideal way to build a defense company. You see the Lockheed Martins of the world, you see Dassault Systems, you see Elbit. These are the companies that we talk about when we are benchmarking ourselves. They are all companies that work in diverse fields. They work across the domains, and that's very important, because in defense, the procurement life cycles are very, very staggered. Like a capital procurement takes 2 years, 3 years to come through. And after the procurement has happened, delivery takes another couple of years. So for that time, you probably cannot sell the same product again. So you need to have, so in Big Bang Boom, we have an internal thing saying that we'll have 20 different products probably in another year's time. We already are working on 12 different products in 3 different domain areas. For us, it's obviously come because I've also been always like that. I've dabbled in different this thing. And what we have done for that is that we have divided the company into 3 major divisions. You have the core tech. So the 3 major tech that we have: electronic warfare, AI and automation, and nanotech. We have 3 people who head it. They have their own core team that work with them. And then we have support services. That is basically DevOps, the guys who build the front end, back end. They are more like a service within the organization. So whenever my AI team wants something built, they will put forward a request to my DevOps and then get it done from them. And then we have the mechanical engineering team that builds the product out. Then we have our consultants in the network base that any of my 5 teams can leverage upon to be able to extend the capability. So we try to keep a very lean team. Only each product that we take is owned not by the tech guys, but by a project manager. So the project management team basically interfaces between the tech, the service providers, the vendors, the end user, the management, and the tech leads. And that sort of allows us to punch a little above our weight.
You'd have to create multiple startups within your own startup for it to be functioning well.
Precisely. Like we look at that P&L being owned by individual people and they being responsible for it. And that's the only way it can be scaled up, right? That is the only way you can encourage a positive competition between the teams and also real ownership of the product delivery that happens.
Do your relatives understand what you do?
Sometimes yes. I mean, so it depends. My father-in-law works with us, so he's, of course, we have frustrated him to no end. He comes from a pure automotive background. He's been one of the top guys around the country, so he's obviously frustrated with the way things happen in our place. But yes, I mean, I wouldn't have come this far without the support from my wife and my family. Uh, they may not understand the tech that we are doing at times, but then they definitely understand that I'm doing something, and that something is of some interest, right? And for one of the things, like just to quote my auditor, a lot of people had a lot of skepticism in my previous startup. My parents didn't really believe it was something, because that was started, I think, back in 2008, and startup was not really a cool thing at that point of time, right? It was more like you were either a employee or a businessman, and a businessman were always money minded, so being an employee was considered the more appropriate thing to be at home. So my parents were not very excited, my in-laws were not very excited about it. My own auditor never really believed that we had a company till we sold it. Okay, he was like, yeah, you guys have just been, kidding around. And then finally we bought him saying, you know what, it's getting acquired for a few $1 million. He's like, what, really? But you guys don't even have revenue. I'm like, sorry, I think the world is changing. So I still remember when I went back to him with this thing saying that, you know what, I'm going to start another company and it's in defense. And I bounced the idea of him and I told him, you know what, sir, do you think it'll work? He's like, yeah, you guys made that work. I'm sure you'll make this work. So in that way, I think my family has sort of graduated a lot. We have learnt the fact that this is a new way of life, and I think the awards, the accolades that have come along with it, the recognition from the top, etc. I think that's given them a lot of confidence. Now we have, for a long time, we had a 1 BHK, right? We started with my garage, we moved to a 1 BHK apartment. It didn't really sound very serious, but now we have an R&D center, we have a production unit, we've had the vice chief, the defense minister, the prime minister coming to meet us. And that's really changed the perspective within the family. So finally, I'm getting some level of bhav, as they call it, at home.
Wow, the skill sets of the families have to evolve as well, not just for the founders. But meeting the Raksha Mantri does help for the storyline within your family and relatives.
Absolutely. Even more than the Raksha Mantri, obviously the Prime Minister was the highlight. The Raksha Mantri, we've met him a few times. He's very, very interesting. He's been very encouraging to all the work that we have done from the very start. He's been a person who says, you know what, don't worry about it. Whatever happens, okay, you guys try, and it's okay if you guys fail. It doesn't really matter. But our most interesting experience was with the Prime Minister himself. And this was during Aero India, where we were asked to give him a briefing of about how our anti-drone systems had been deployed across the border in the trial phase, and what is it that we've been able to achieve. It was a good interaction, very, very insightful, in terms of the fact that while we were an anti-drone company, we had also built these extremely miniature drones. We had made these extremely small drones, and it was there in the same stall or the space that we call it. And he quickly spotted it, and he said, you know what, can you tell me what this is all about? And this is something that I personally found very interesting, because when you think of the Prime Minister, you always think of a person who will ask courtesy questions and then move on. But Modi ji was very, very curious on what we had built. So we told him that this is a nano drone. It's a drone that's very small. It can fly in almost undetected and be able to, provide a coverage or a surveillance of an area before the strike happens. And usually when we present our drone to even the tech stalwarts, the first question that they ask is, how long can it fly? Right? Because that becomes very significant. And then they ask about how good the cameras are. Which is our usual answers that we are always prepared for. But actually speaking, that's not very relevant, because this is always meant to be a quick recce. A quick recce, 5 minutes is more than enough. 15 minutes is an overkill as far as a recce is concerned. The first question that the Prime Minister asked us was, how much sound does this make? And that shows that in that 2 minutes of interaction, not only has he understood the product and the end use, and he realizes that if you have to make a silent recce, if I have to make a recce, the enemy shouldn't know that my drone is there. So if I have a noisy drone, it's not really useful. And to me, that was a very first-hand experience of what kind of a person who leads the country, because there's no way he's prepped for it, because that's not part of our, let's say, the cheat sheet that was provided to us, what we should speak to him, what he's going to speak to us. That drone's existence was not even known to the people organizing the show. So that to me was a first-hand experience of what kind of a guy he was. And I think it also shows in the way the ecosystem has blossomed today.
Got it. And maybe could you explain what a recce means to our audience?
Recce basically means, you sort of scout out the place, you understand what you're getting into. Let's say our army forces have to enter a particular region. They need to know what kind of enemy is there, how many people are there, what kind of weapon systems are happening. So quick information that gets passed on, we'll be better prepared to engage. It prevents our gaze from getting into a situation that can prove dangerous to us.
Got it. And in meeting the Prime Minister and the Raksha Mantri, you've had a unique vantage point of understanding the market pull directly from the buyer itself. Can you paint us a picture of where Indian defense is headed over the next 5 years?
Sure. So I think here, along with meeting the people who are leading this particular environment, it's also important to see that the talk that they do translates to policies, and that's very, very important. So you will see India as a country has always been a net technology importer. And so for us, importing from foreign countries has always been very, very exciting. The first edition of the government, let's say the 2014 version, there was a big push on Make in India, where they said, let's start making in India. But Make in India is a manufacturing push where they say, let's make the product in India. It may be machining, it may be assembly, it may be manufacturing. It basically happens in India. But the government didn't stop there, because there, of course, you're getting jobs, you're getting the industries built up. It's fantastic. There's absolutely no problem. The government then started pushing the agenda of Atmanirbharta. The Atmanirbharta basically distinguished itself from Make in India in the fact that you say you're self-reliant. Self-reliant means in times of crisis, you don't depend on foreign supply chains to be able to meet your requirement. So which basically means that manufacturing is not enough. So you can't take just CKDs or SKDs and assemble in India. The entire supply chain needs to move to India. You need to have components that are made in India, components that are sourced from India, assembly that happens here, QA, QC or quality assurance that happens in India, etc. Then they moved it further and they said we will start giving most priority to IDDM. IDDM stands for indigenously designed, developed and manufactured. So Make in India captures the manufacturing, Atmanirbharta captures the development, and then they said no, now we want design also to be done in India. Right, and that's basically when Big Bang Boom also got started at around the same time, where the entire tech ground up needs to be designed in India, it needs to be developed in India, and also manufactured in India. And currently, if you look at where we stand, there is a blanket ban on any product to be imported. So they say every product must first go to IDDM. If the army or the armed forces, the user realizes that IDDM is not possible, then we will do what is known as Buy Indian, which basically means we'll give it to an Indian company to do. If that doesn't work, then we'll do Buy and Make, where we buy a little and then the rest is made in India. If none of the three can work, only then, with only the approval of the Raksha Mantri himself, can any direct defense import happen. So that creates so much more work for, let's say, any unit that wants to buy from abroad. So for them, it's easier to buy from Indian companies. So just out of the fact that people don't want to do more work to achieve the same thing, more units, more commands, more divisions, more brigades are starting to directly engage with Indian startup, thinking, you are able to give me something, I'll rather take from you. The second thing, this is a little more informal that has happened in the ecosystem, again guided by the Raksha Mantri and the Prime Minister themselves. There has been an informal word out, and that's translated to conversations that we have had with people that say that even if we are able to meet 70-80% of what the international community gives, it's okay. They are like, you don't need to match them eye for an eye. They are able to hit a target at 100 meters, you are able to hit it at 75, we'll still buy from you. I'll pay you 15% more than I pay them. So the government has taken a stance that I will take a slightly lesser quality product, or a lesser capable product, not quality, lesser capable product at a higher price from an Indian company, so that version 2 will be equivalent to what is there abroad, and version 3 will probably be better than what is there. And that kind of a forward looking thought is basically what sets the standard for what the ecosystem is today and what the ecosystem is going to be tomorrow. If this work continues, I think in 5 years time we are going to end up being a next exporter of technology.
Absolutely. The flip side of actually choosing a career that is very alien to the normal citizen is that it also comes with a lot of unknown trade-offs. What do you wish that you had known, or other people who would want to start up in the line of defense should know before they get started?
I think the critical part that I wish I had known is that there is a lot of inherent information inavailability in defense. Like a lot of people out there are willing to tell that, you know what, I want a great camera, right? But they are unwilling to actually part with key information that will help you build it. Like for example, let's say if you take an example of drones, right? And you say that, okay, you need to make drones fly for an hour at that very high altitudes, at wind speeds. There is already information available in the ecosystem, not from competitors. The competitors cannot be blamed. They are competing with you. But I'm saying from the end user side also, there's a lot of information available of what has been tried, what has been failed, etc. So in the academic environment that I come from, that kind of a knowledge is freely shared, because failures are considered as a way towards the success. So people publish the failures so that the new researcher coming in knows, okay, you know, I do a literature survey, I know these things have not worked, I know what is the next thing to try. In defense, it doesn't happen. You don't know what has been tried, you don't know what has failed. So a lot of time and a lot of money actually goes into reinventing the wheel. And so it is very, very important for you to have a very good defense network before you start. I obviously have no background in defense, and I had to start off without it. But my co-founder Praveen, his parents were from Hindustan Aeronautics, so they had a little bit of background in defense. But then it's not that helped us a lot. HAL is, you know, HAL has their own confidentiality, this thing, so it's not like we got a lot out of it. But then I think having somebody from the user as a part of your core team would make a big difference. If today I had to restart it, if not as a co-founder, but at least as a part of my core team, I would have at least one either ex-NDA or an ex-defense guy as a part of the team. I think that's one thing that would be very essential, and that's one thing I would recommend to all the new guys who are trying to out there. Ensure that there is an user engagement, and that will go a long way in ensuring that you don't waste your time recreating what has already been done.
Okay, one last question before we head into some quick takeaways for our audience. How many spectacle frames do you have? Because the last time I met you, you were wearing a neon green frame. I thought that looked really cool.
So again, you know, startups make a big change in it. So I'm a great fan of Lenskart. So they have this one-on-one offer that's going on. And of course, you know, once I have a wife who picks it out, you know, you go to buy one and we end up coming home with 3 or 4 systems. Right.
Awesome. Now we move on to some quick takeaways for our audience. Take no more than 10 seconds for each question. What would you change looking back on the journey so far?
Get started a little early. I think one of the things that we did was we started off with we didn't start off with the product development. We initially thought we would get into the offsets program, we'll start working with HAL. We always thought working with the DPSUs or the PSUs would be easier than working with the government. But then Dr. Ajay Kumar, the ex-defense secretary, changed all that. So we wasted at least a year's time trying to break our head against the wrong doors. I think we should have engaged with the user upfront.
Very cool. What are you the most grateful for?
I think I'm most grateful for the support I've got from my family. They've understood the quirks that are associated with it. They know the travels that come out of the blue. I'm also grateful for the iDEX ecosystem. The iDEX ecosystem has been fantastic. I mean, we are very, very bullish on it. We started off with that, and that's basically solved a lot of the problems. A lot of things that I say about user engagement, funds that are required, etc. iDEX basically provides that on our platter.
Pick an alternate career if not for defense. Of course, you've been an academician, but what else would you have done?
Love to write a book.
Really?
Yeah. I've always imagined myself to be able to come up with an entire storyline, you know, engage with characters and things like that. And I think it's still a dream.
One non-negotiable quality you look for in your team?
I think tenacity. I think there are two things that I look for. One is tenacity. So we like people who don't take no for an answer and get things done. The second thing is I really respect the team members who are able to do things that I can't do. So whether it is, let's say, a financial model that I'm not able to make or cracking a tech that I can't tech, if I can find a guy who's able to do something that I'm not able to do, then he's part of my team. Sure.
What's the big dream for Big Bang Boom?
I think we would like to create a defense behemoth, and that's the way we are thinking about it now. We started off small, as I was telling earlier, but then now I think creating a company that's worth, let's say, 1 lakh crore seems to be a reality. It seems to be that we've just won our first big order of our first product of our first domain. We have 3 domains, we have 12 products, and we have a very, very good supportive investor community that's given us a really long runway. So I think where we stand here, trying to create a Lockheed Martin in India or trying to create a Elbit Systems in India or ELTA is a reality. And I think Big Bang Boom has a shot of doing it. That's what we want to do. This year, we've sort of been able to do something very, very important. This year, as a part of our fundraise, we've raised around 250 crores. And as a part of that, not only have we raised money for the company, but we have actually returned a lot of the capital to our early investors. So defense, by definition, has a long cycle period. It takes 8 years, 10 years for a company to come up and be very successful. And sometimes investors get tired. Investors don't have that patience, and there's already in the, when there's a unicorn jumping out of the books every other month, people are very eager to realize the returns that are there. So we realize rather than trying to find investors who will stay with us for 10 years, it might be better for us to recycle investors. So the early investors who came in, we have given them an exit. The new investors who came in are happy to stay with us for the next 5 years. So that makes Big Bang Boom quite unique in the sense that we are a company, we are not a startup that keeps taking as much money as we can. People love to do big fundraisers, right? When we say we have raised 250 crores, Big Bang Boom has not taken the money. We have taken 100 crores odd. 100 crores has been used to provide exits to the existing shareholders. Thereby, Big Bang Boom has achieved 2 major things. One, we have achieved profitability. Last year we were profitable. This year we are going to be definitely profitable. So we are a startup. Within 5 years of our journey, we have turned profitable. 2, we have started returning capital to our investors. And the class of startups that do this are called dragons. They're not unicorns. So one of the things that we are going out in the ecosystem and telling is, unicorn is fantastic. Unicorn means your valuation is going up, you're raising more money, but we are actually profitable and we are starting to return money to our investors. And we are hoping that our investors make money and they're happy with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shiva. It's been a pleasure. We wish you all the best.
Thanks, Nitish. Thanks for having me here.
That's it for this episode. We'll be back with more startup stories. A big thank you to the audience for tuning in. Do like, share and subscribe to our channel and get the best seats in-house to understand how deep tech startups are shaping the future of our country. Until next time, I'm your host Nitish. Crafting Bharat, a deep tech edition, is an initiative by NewsReach in association with VC Circle and produced by HT Smartcast.